Hello and welcome back to another episode of That Sports Guys podcast. I am Craig Forrestal. This is the That Sports Guys podcast. Find me on Twitter at That Sports Guy, at that_sports_guy. And as always, we're brought to you by NFLDraftDiamonds.com. NFLDraftDiamonds.com. Keep it locked to keep up to date with all the latest happenings in the NFL college world and also with the ever so happening NFL draft that just completed. And speaking of which, I have my trusted buddy with me today, Austin James Smith. He is a well-versed draft expert, follows the Cowboys pretty intently, and that is what we are going to do. We are going to examine the state of the franchise today with the Dallas Cowboys. And a little bit about Austin, you can find him on Twitter at NFL Draft Austin. Also, you can find his work on drafttech.com and pigskinnut.com. Austin, why don't you go ahead and tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Well, obviously growing up, a guy that played all sports, but football was always very close to my heart. Growing up down in Texas, football is what everybody yearns for. And I was really always one that loved to be that guy that people came to and that, Austin, man, did you see that this weekend? Or man, can you believe that call? And I love to have people come to me for my opinion on something like that. And the NFL draft was just a perfect marriage for me. You got to know as much as possible about the college game. You got to know as much as possible about the NFL game. It's kind of like 32 different puzzles with a million possible pieces. And you're just kind of trying to mix them all in there. But yeah, I played football briefly at North Texas. And after that kind of ended sooner than I'd hoped, I told myself I wanted to be part of, I wanted to stay part of the game, whether it be coaching, whether it be as a sports writer, which is what I currently do for 4 newspapers. And more importantly, I wanted to carve out my niche in the NFL draft. And Draft Tech gave me an opportunity. I covered a few teams over there and doing scouting reports, which is what I do for them. And then Pigskin Nut came along and said, hey, we want some of your work. Whereas Draft Tech is kind of a culmination of team analysts all doing mock drafts together with an algorithm format. They said, man, we want Austin's mock drafts. We want to know what you think about, each team. We wanted to, hear your thoughts year round about it. So Pigskin Nut kind of brought me over and eventually carved out a niche for me doing Dallas Cowboy work as well. And this is what I love to do. This is what I love to talk about, Dallas Cowboys and NFL draft.
And it seems like we got the perfect marriage right now as we're going to go ahead and get this thing kicked off with those Dallas Cowboys draft picks. And just as a reminder for everyone, in round 1, pick 17 overall, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver from Oklahoma, was the selection. He actually finished number 11 overall on my big board. And as you'll see, the Cowboys had a lot of steals based on my final big board rankings. But Austin, what did you think about the CeeDee Lamb pick?
Boy, hey, you had him at 11. I had him at 9. From what I've heard out of Dallas, they had him ranked as high as 6 overall. This was a guy that I think everybody kind of wrote off. He's not getting to Dallas at 17. The Cowboys had big needs on the defensive side. C.J. Henderson was a kind of a hope that he might slide in near that spot. K'Lavon Chaisson was a guy that everybody kind of expected to be the guy. But, I mentioned it on numerous occasions. We just don't know what's going to happen early on. We expected to see a lot of movement. We expected to see a lot of, quarterbacks. We expected Jordan Love to possibly get into that first half of the first round. We expected all 4 tackles to go. There was a variety of defenders that we all expected to be gone. And with that happening, we knew there was a possibility that wide receivers could fall. Now, many of us, I think, thought that would probably be Henry Ruggs. I kind of felt like, whereas as Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb were the complete receiver packages, I felt like Henry Ruggs was, and I don't want to call him a one-trick pony, but speed was basically the tell-all
sales
end-all.
point.
Yeah, It was, exactly. And that's the thing is I kind of caution people. I said, guys, whereas I'd love to have Jeudy or Lamb to fall to that point if for some reason that happened, Ruggs is kind of a guy that I don't know if Dak can maximize his skill sets. Dak doesn't have super arm strength like a number of these other receivers can. Can he make all the throws? Of course he can. But in today's NFL, with these spread out offenses, that's no longer a positive cliche when it comes to quarterback play. It's more of a necessity, but you have to make all the throws. What we're looking for now is we're looking for those big arm guys that can make the throws that we didn't know existed prior to Patrick Mahomes making it, or a Josh Allen or someone like that. Where it's like, wow, the deep throw doesn't necessarily have to be early in the progression. This guy's got enough strength that, man, and the ability to extend the play. He can still hit a guy on a deep route, well past read 1 or even read 2. And Dak doesn't necessarily have that. And that's something that Henry Ruggs, you put him with a quarterback like that, and I think it maximizes his value. I don't think he has the same value as a CD Lamb or a Jerry Jeudy do in Dallas's thing. And Lamb was the ultimate pick for me. Lamb of the three was the guy I said, man, that's the guy that makes Dak Prescott better, because CeeDee Lamb at just under 6'3", with those 34-inch arms, he's already a big catch radius. And when you factor in the torso flexibility he's got, the body control he plays with, the comfort level, him extending his hands to the ball regularly and snatching that ball away from his frame, it just maximizes his catch radius. And I continued to throw this saying out there about CeeDee Lamb to all the Cowboy fans that were listening to me. I said, guys, he makes less accurate quarterbacks more accurate. And with what we've got with Dak Prescott, that's a very, very favorable trait you want in a wide receiver. For Cowboys fans, how many times last year did you have that debate in your head when Randall Cobb, a ball would bounce off his pants, or Amari Cooper or Michael Gallup or even Jason Witten, and you said to yourself, oh, they've got to bring that in. But then again, Dak Prescott, you got to put that in front. Dak Prescott, you got to keep that ball up above his knees, or you got to bring that pass down. It was always kind of a debate in your own head about, well, should the receiver have caught it, or could Dak have been more accurate? Well, guys, that's the thing. Dak Prescott, he's probably never going to have that pinpoint accuracy. So you need these receivers like CeeDee Lamb that haul in those off-target throws on a regular basis. And so when he fell to 17, it was funny. Right about 15, I was feeling good with K'Lavon Chaisson still being there. And then 15 hit, and there was Jeudy, Lamb, and Chaisson. And I said to myself, wow, the Dallas Cowboys, whoa, we might have to change up here. One of these receivers is going to make it to us. Atlanta's not going to take a receiver. We're going to get our hands on Lamb or Jeudy, and at that point, everything went out the door. Value suddenly became, the everything that we wanted in that 17th pick. All the idea of having Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb all together. I remind people that receiver trio, none of them are 25 yet. Amari Cooper doesn't turn 26 until June. I mean, this is going to be at the end of the day, that's what CeeDee Lamb, brings to the table. He adds us a third big weapon out there on the perimeter. He adds us a guy that just is a phenomenal, catch radius, phenomenal possession target, phenomenal deep threat. Yes, he's got area to grow in his route running. You know what? We could say that about a lot of receivers coming out of the college game. At the end of the day, his ability to do things before the ball gets to them, as well as his ability to get to, to make plays after the catch, those are going to be the things that really stand out about this pick. And Cowboys fans, I can't see how they're not going to love this particular scenario.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm with you. You touched on it all right there with CeeDee Lamb being as close to a complete package as you could possibly have coming into the professional game. Like you mentioned, the route running, that'll come with time. Once he gets established and comfortable in the new system in Dallas with McCarthy. And like you said, once he develops that relationship with Dak, those, off-target or less than ideal passes, they'll turn into 50-50 balls with CeeDee Lamb. And then going over the rest of the draft, I'm just going to run through the rest of the rounds, and then we'll jump into a couple of picks that you want to discuss, Austin. Pick 51 overall in the second round was Trevon Diggs, cornerback from Alabama. I had him at 32 overall on my board. Pick 82 in the third round was Neville Gallimore, D-tackle, Oklahoma. I had him at 24 overall. Fourth round, pick 123, Reggie Robinson the third, safety cornerback combination, Tulsa. I had him at 268. I know from your work, Austin, you were a little bit higher on him. Round five, Tyler Biadasz at 146 overall, center from Wisconsin. I had him at 75 overall on my board. Round five, pick 179, Bradley Anae, DN, Utah. I had him at 78 overall. And then with the seventh round pick of Ben DiNucci at 231 overall, quarterback from James Madison, he did not make my final rankings. But fun fact about him, he did grow up playing basketball for Mike McCarthy's brother. So that's how he ties into the Dallas Cowboys. So, Austin, what say you about the rest of the draft?
Yeah, I think going into this process, I really thought we were going to see less teams taking a flyer on a guy. A little bit more of an unknown guy, somebody that maybe they'd done a little extra work with, had that extra one-on-one workout with, put him in some scenarios that he wasn't in college that he might face in their system, and got to know them better as an athlete, as a player altogether. We just didn't have that through this process because of this whole pandemic. Guys weren't getting those opportunities at pro days to pull a guy aside and put him through a few drills or bring him in on a top 30 visit or things like that. So really, I mean, I thought we would see teams stick to their overall boards, take less risks, go with more value. And I thought the Dallas Cowboys hit a home run with that. You were going through your rankings there. 5 of my 7 players in this draft, just like you, 5 of the 7 players Dallas selected were on my top 100 board. I had Diggs at 27. I had Gallimore at 44. I had Biadasz at 59 and Anae at 54. That's outstanding value. And I know some of them have some question marks, but and this is what I continue to preach to some of these guys. Guys, that's not a guarantee that this draft is going to be a home run for the Dallas Cowboys. But here's the thing. When you look at this group and the way you went about taking them, in 3, 4, 5 years, if it didn't work out, you can live with it. You look at yourself and say, hey, what could we have done different? Really? Swung for the fences on maybe somebody we didn't have as much information on, maybe a smaller school guy or somebody who, far less production at the college level, or their tape really didn't, tell the true story of the type of football player they could be long term. I mean, that's, those are the guys that make you pull your hair out when they don't work. When you take a Biadasz in the last pick in the 4th round, I mean, he comes from a factory there at Wisconsin. He's got very technically sound, handwork, footwork, got good movement for being a big guy. Sure, there are reasons he fell into day 3. I thought he was a day 2 lock. But there's some of the tape out there. Go watch the 2 games he played in his career against Iowa. He absolutely looked like the best center that this draft had to offer. I don't know if Cesar Ruiz, Lloyd Cushenberry, Matt Hennessy, I don't know if any of them had tape that was better than that Iowa tape that he put in 2 straight years at the center position.
Oh, no. Oh, absolutely. But I think with Biadasz, the question is, you look at some of his film from the beginning of this season, specifically Central Michigan, and like you said, it was a night and day situation from that Iowa film where he looks like a surefire late 1, early 2, no questions asked, an elite prospect. But then you have some other film where he does look like he's a little bit overmatched and he can get a little sloppy. But like you said, he comes from a factory, so the skill set is there to work with. And when you look at the success that they had with Frederick, who just retired and stepped away, he's also a Wisconsin product at the center position. Maybe you can get lightning strike twice. But I want to hear your thoughts on the Trevon Diggs, Reggie Robinson combination DB picks, because I know you were high on Robinson, and just how you think that they're going to mesh together, or what the plan is for them, keep them both on the outside, maybe try them both a little bit on the inside, or How do you think they
You
fit?
know, I think it kind of tells the story to what Dallas wants to do moving forward at the cornerback position. I think they stay on the perimeter, and I think Dallas has made it clear, guys, we want our perimeter corners up on the line of scrimmage. We want guys that are going to disrupt receivers early in the routes. I'm thinking we're going to see Mike Nolan and Jim Tomsula, the defensive line coach. We're going to see them get together and find different ways to create pressure, blitzes, stunts, all kinds of things like that that force quarterbacks to try and get rid of a football sooner. That works into their hands when it comes to having corners that can disrupt things early. Quick throws are all about timing. Quarterbacks aren't necessarily, throwing to a receiver on those quick throws as much as they're throwing to a spot, and they're trusting that their receiver gets there. Well, that's where guys like this can come in handy with that size. Both these guys are well over 6 feet. Obviously, Trayvon Diggs is slightly taller than Robinson. Both of them long arms. Both of them a pretty good frames. I think Robinson could still get a little bit stronger, although we have seen, there was, especially at the Senior Bowl, there were times where he did show that, hey, I can still, against this bigger competition, I can still get physical with some of these guys. Another thing, both of them, very good ball skills. And for Dallas Cowboys fans, that should, that should put a little extra hitch in your giddy up. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys, even years we've had good defenses, have not created a ton of turnovers. This is not a team. I mean, going back to the Terrence Newman, going back to Anthony Henry, Adam Pac-Man Jones, Mike Jenkins, Maurice Claiborne, Orlando Scandrick, the list just goes on and on. Cheeto Bay, Awuzie, Byron Jones, who's one of the better corners in the game right now. Jordan Lewis, none of these guys have put up big-time interception numbers in their careers in Dallas. And, you start to wonder, what in the world? We've had so many different defensive coordinators, so many different, philosophies on that side of the ball, and yet we continue to just lack that kind of productivity at the position when it comes to intercepting balls. And that is something I think, new defensive back coach Maurice Lindquist has really hit the head on. Guys, hey, I need guys that can finish. I don't need guys that can locate the ball. I need guys that can locate it and go up and finish it. And that's what I think both of them bring. I love the flexibility that both of them bring because in my opinion, that's added value. When you've got a guy like Trayvon Diggs, who entering his last year, I thought, hey, he could be one of the better safety prospects in this class, just depending on how they use him this year. And I mean, he's got the size. He's a physical player. I really thought, he's got that ability that, hey, you could move him inside if you wanted to. I think that brings added value. He can also help in the return game. Reggie Robinson's got a little time at safety. That's something people have considered with him. I think it adds to their value that, hey, worst case scenario, we might have a third safety on our hands, somebody to go to when we go into our three safety looks. In best case scenario, who knows? In 2 years, we might have our two starting perimeter corners, which was a weakness going into this draft. Now, all of a sudden, you've got those two. Cheeto Bay, Awuzie, and Jordan Lewis are in contract years. Anthony Brown's done good things for us in the past. And, oh, by the way, we just brought in Darrell Worley, a guy that's got that combination, big-bodied, can play a little bit of safety, did that for the Raiders at the end of last year, but also play a corner, plays in the nickel quite a bit. Suddenly, all of a sudden, cornerback is just kind of taking a complete swing to, and I'm not saying that it's going to be a strength, but it definitely has the potential to look a lot better than it did 1 week ago.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the ball skills that Trayvon Diggs has, he was originally a wide receiver at Alabama. His brother is Stephon Diggs. So there should be no surprise there with him making plays on the balls and being a menace defensively, creating turnovers. Like you said, something that's been lacking with the Cowboys for some time. Reggie Robinson, I was a little bit lower on him than you. I had him at 268 on my overall board, so I had him as a fringe pick, priority free agent. For him going in the 4th round, I've learned in this business that you do not criticize picks. just because I don't see it doesn't mean that Jerry Jones and the Cowboys didn't. So I'm not gonna bash the pick or anything. I'm just going to say I did not see what the Cowboys saw or that you have seen, as I know you were high
I
on
had
him.
him at 133 on my board, and a lot of it was projection. A lot of it was, man, you look at the size, you look at the athletic traits. There is definitely something to be gotten out of there. And, you look at Tulsa. I know Tulsa's, got a solid coaching staff, but has he really learned some of the techniques that a Trayvon Diggs did at Alabama under Nick Saban? I mean, I really look at it for him. My biggest thing when I came away from the Senior Bowl was, man, his early footwork when he plays up at the line of scrimmage, it makes or breaks him when it comes to his confidence, man. If he comes out of those first few steps off the line with confidence and he's on balance and he's in position, boy, suddenly he is an aggressor. When he comes off and somebody kind of gets him insecure about his positioning and his balance, because maybe his feet kind of got a little chaotic, and now all of a sudden I'm trying to recover. When he gets into that panic mode, that confidence level drops and he gets a little grabby, and all of a sudden he turns into a bail player where it's, oh my gosh, get deep, and it just completely messes the process for him. That's really where it's going to be for me is, man, let's get that footwork cleaned up. Let's get that balance cleaned up early on. But I get you want to punch and you want to disrupt at the line of scrimmage, but not at the expense of your balance. We don't want you lunging. We want that to be a bonus to helping you get into that receiver's hip and really disrupting him getting to full speed or getting into his route. That's really where I saw the area to improve. And with small school kids, a lot of times, the technique just they haven't had the same privilege of learning some of those more advanced techniques. Like I say, as some of these kids that go to a place, especially if you're a DB, you go to Alabama with Nick Saban. That's what he's done. I mean, so it's certainly something. I think the Cowboys, it is a little bit of a swing for the fence because, I mean, he could turn out to be just a special teamer. He has blocked 4 kicks during his career at Tulsa. But yes, obviously when you've got that 4th round pick, considering that you passed on guys like Biotish and Anai, and lucky they came back around to you. But, those are guys that might have more early impacts for the Cowboys based on their skill sets. You kind of hoping that pick of Robinson doesn't end up biting you into the rear on some of the guys you passed on.
Oh, no, absolutely. And like you said, some of the guys that they passed on ended up coming back their way in the undrafted free agent signings. I saw one report that when the draft concluded, the Dallas Cowboys had 11 players remaining on their overall board, and they were able to sign 7 of those 11 players. So the Cowboys went in with a plan. They went in with players that they liked. They were able to bring those players in. And then I'll go through a couple of the undrafted free agents that caught my eye, the 4 guys that I think have high upside. First one for me is Rondell Carter, edge player DN from James Madison University. He was a 3-sport high school athlete, football, track, basketball. Originally went to Rutgers as a 3-star recruit, but this is the thing that always translates. It's the sack production. And over the draft coverage throughout the weekend, that was said a couple of times. But he had 23 and a half career sacks at James Madison, with 19 and a half coming in the last 2 seasons. So the sack production is definitely there off the edge. Wide receiver Aaron Parker from Rhode Island. I was able to see him in person at the East-West Shrine game. He had a cousin that was drafted this year, Isaiah Coulter, by the Houston Texans, also a wide receiver from Rhode Island. He has good size, 6'2", 210-ish, tremendous ball skills. He's an ex-basketball player, great body control. The thing with him is he's not a blazer, but he did crack my final big board at 187 overall. Garrett Marino, defensive lineman from UAB. He's one of my favorite players in this year's draft, regardless of draft position or round ranking, anything like that. He was a one-time Arizona State commitment, ended up at Montana State, finally landed at UAB, some off-the-field things, but completely cleaned it up at UAB, was a model citizen. Played up and down the D-line at UAB, and I will give you just my quick notes on him from my scouting report. Disruptive, intense, high motor, but small. Had him at 228 overall. And then finally, Luther Kirk from Illinois State. He was the defensive MVP of the East-West Shrine game. He's a Texas native, 6 foot, 194. Participated in the Northwestern Pro Day before everything got shut down. Clocked a 4.57 40 with a 39-inch vertical. He has unreal range. He went from he covered half the field on one interception that he had at the East-West Shrine game. It was called back due to penalty, but he did have a second interception that stood in the game. Highly productive. He was unreal at Illinois State. And just as a little something, as a parting shot, my brother was a defensive back coach in college. When he walked out on the field, Luther Kirk, my brother looked at me and said, "Who's that?" I said, "It's Luther Kirk." He goes, "He's going to be the best player on the field today." And sure enough, he showed up and he played pretty well. So that was just a couple of my undrafted guys. Some notes on them. Like I said, the Cowboys cleaned up. But Austin, what about you? Any undrafted guys that jumped out at you or that you thought?
Well, for starters, you mentioned Rondell Carter. That's a guy that I've already been hearing. The Cowboys made him a priority, and there are clauses in his contract with some guaranteed money that make it sound as if they've already got a role in mind for him. There's already a very strong chance that he's in their plans for the 53-man roster. And I'll say this much too. We're moving to a little bit of a hybrid scheme. I think he does have that ability to play that walk down linebacker in what Mike Nolan's looking to do. That is something we thought we would get with Chason at 17. Turns out we didn't address it at all through this process. So he is definitely somebody. Another player at that position that, man, I watched his tape, and it's far from perfect, but boy, are the physical skills there, the explosiveness, and that's Azur Kamara at Kansas. Let me tell you, this guy is a fluid athlete for his size. He is chiseled up. There may be a lot of, we may still be trying to get a good football player out of that mold. But man, he is a guy that, man, the physical, this is going to be a guy that turns heads. He's going to make some plays in training camp, and people are going to say, who was that? And that's a guy that caught my eye. You mentioned the receiver Parker out of Rhode Island. It's funny. Look at all three of the receivers the Cowboys brought in. Kendrick Rogers out of Texas A&M, Parker, Guidry out of Mississippi State. These are not small guys. These are guys between 6'2.5", 6'3" inches, big catch radiuses. Guidry's probably got the best speed of the bunch. Rogers, playing at A&M, boy, had some really big moments, but never really found consistency. These are going to be some guys, once again, big targets for Dak Prescott. Big targets, guys that can make, like you said, great ball skills, basketball background, can go up and make contested catches. That's something Michael Gallup is very, very good at. He's a 1,000-yard receiver in his second season here in Dallas. Once again, let's get those guys that make Dak Prescott better. And I can't stress that enough. We're getting ready at some point, most likely this offseason, to give Dak Prescott a heck of a contract. Let's make sure we give him every opportunity to live up to it. Another guy that kind of caught my eye was Terrence Steele over at Texas Tech. Going into the Senior Bowl, I'd seen a little bit of him during my time watching Jordan Brooks over at the linebacker position. I'd watched the whole film and tried to get an eye for some of these other guys. And, I wasn't exactly impressed with his tape at Texas Tech. He got to the Senior Bowl. He impressed me a little bit more in the one-on-one stuff. You saw a guy that was a little bit more easy moving. It seemed like, the coaches had worked with him and maybe unlocked a little bit of that untapped athleticism that maybe he wasn't getting to while he was at Texas Tech. You saw a guy a little bit easier mover. Now, there is some stiffness in his hips, but I saw some flashes where I said, you know what? That could be a project toward the end, maybe even starts off with a practice squad. Who knows, man? This could be a guy. We had a guy that Cowboys fans will remember a little bit, Jeremy Parnell, that started as that kind of player and eventually worked his way up to where we weren't afraid when Doug Free or someone like that would go down with an injury to put Jeremy Parnell into the starting lineup. And then all of a sudden, he gets signed by the Jaguars to be their starting right tackle. And that's kind of a guy that has some intrigue to me. A couple of TCU running backs in there, kind of, between Anderson and the fullback, that you kind of wonder how They could add an element to the running back position that we might not already have. Cowboys may run with a little bit more of a natural running back, a natural fullback than we've seen in the past. Definitely, guys. Another guy I know that they considered, or at least they say that they considered around the fifth round pick. Their fifth round pick was Sean McKeon, the tight end over at Michigan, a guy that they think has a little bit more ability to add some room on his frame and be that inline guy that could possibly be your blocking tight end specialist. Yes, we brought in Blake Bell. Dalton Schultz has a skill set that we still haven't been able to get the most out of that fits in that mold. But another guy that, who knows, an NFL weight room could do wonders for him, and maybe after a year on the practice squad, or maybe he slides on to a third or fourth tight end spot on the roster, and then maybe after a year you're saying, hey, this guy, you know what, he's going to have a role for us moving forward. We're going to find ways to get him on the field in that blocking role. Now, that obviously, you've got high hopes for all these guys. Very few of them are probably going to, live up to what you're hoping, but it's something this is the part of the process where everybody's optimism should be sky high, because you just see these guys for their potential, for their variety of production at the college level. And then training camp comes and balloons start bursting. But you know what? I look between this draft class and a number of guys that they were able to get their hands on in the undrafted portion of this process. I look at that and I say, man, by the time training camp has come and gone, assuming that we are on a schedule with everything, not knowing how this pandemic is going to continue to work out, I think that the Cowboys have a very good opportunity to add 9, maybe 10 players to this roster and really improve the overall value. And for something, Craig, that's something that I've kind of gained a reputation on with. Is I've all and maybe it's something you could say I has become one of my cliches. Super Bowl contenders are made up of teams that collect the best. They bring together the best culmination of 53 players worth of talent. It's the teams that build the best 53-man roster that are truly Super Bowl contenders, not the ones that go out and put out the best 22 starters. And that's just a time-proven theory. There are going to be injuries. There are going to be cap situations. There are going to be people that fall into your lap in the draft. I mean, the bottom line is you always want that talent on the back end of your roster, because at any moment's notice, you could need them, or they could that value could be turned into a trade chip, could be turned into a compensatory pick. You never know. So I really look at this class and I say, man, this group from top to bottom, including those undrafted guys, we've really got an opportunity to improve the quality of our 53-man roster, and that's what this process is all about.
Oh, no, absolutely. And like you said, with the injuries and everything that pops up throughout the course of the season, that 53 is really more like a 65, including the practice squad, and then having a list of guys that you had in camp earlier that are local, that were college guys last year that are staying in shape, because you look at the injuries and everything, you need more than 53 bodies. You need more than 60 bodies to get through a season. So, like you said, it's the scouting department. It's the depth of the team. It's having those guys ready to go and fire on all cylinders. And you did mention a couple of things with Terrence Steele being able to develop on the practice squad, and then also Kamara out of Kansas. Interesting thing with him is I thought that they were going to maybe try, and how you said, going to that more hybrid look, bringing in Tom Sula and Mike Nolan. And they also brought in Aldon Smith. And I was wondering, maybe there's a little bit of Aldon Smith and Kamara's game that they saw from a long, lean type of perspective. I know now Aldon Smith has had the body transformation and he's all hulked up. But when he first came into the league, he had a long, lean frame with untapped, crazy athletic potential. So maybe that's something to look for with how you guys are building with, like you said, transitioning to more of a hybrid. And also with Rondell James, exactly. I feel like the size 6'3", right around 270, he makes him a perfect candidate to play that walk down linebacker spot. And then you hit on something that I want to jump into, and that is Dak Prescott. You said they're getting ready to offer him a contract, you think, at some point coming up here soon. So I won't go ahead and pepper you with questions. I'll just let you go ahead and what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah,
is Dak going to
I
get
do
paid?
think he's going to get paid. There's had to be a lot of give and take to this process. And, it's so difficult because Cowboy fans, obviously you want to keep everybody. And we just watched Byron Jones walk away and everybody, corner's one of the hardest positions to really get it right. And there's truth to that. But, man, when you draft as well as this team has drafted at the top of the draft, and I'm talking about, the last 11 years, you're talking about 8 first-round draft picks. If I got to go back and double-check my math. But I've done it before. I'm pretty sure it's eight draft picks in the last 11 years that are first-round picks that have gone on to make Pro Bowls for the Dallas Cowboys. When you have that kind of success, it seems like there are times when you hit on the second and third round guys in a particular draft or 2 straight drafts. Now all of a sudden you've got a big group of them all piled up that need contracts at the same time. And you've got to be able to identify which ones you're willing to let walk, which ones that you think, you can replace. And unfortunately, that shot us in the foot with Byron Jones because you know what? We still want to make sure we can keep a Dak Prescott. And oh, by the way, still have some flexibility in the future after that Prescott deal to start to worry about maybe a Michael Gallup, who second year in the league and he's 1,000-yard receiver. Maybe Leighton Vander Esch. Yes, he had an injury issue last year. Before that, he was, one of the top defenders in rookie defenders in the league. Went to a Pro Bowl as a rookie. You want to make sure that, guys, we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves to a future with salary cap issues. We want to try and spread these out. As far as Dak Prescott's concerned, that's been a little bit of the trick is Dak. We needed somebody to wait their turn. And unfortunately, it seems like it might have been you that, hey, bud, we want to push this out a little bit further because in the last calendar year, let's call it 13 months because I think Tank signed prior to the draft, last year's draft. But, you're talking about DeMarcus Lawrence, one of the top contracts for a defensive end. You're talking about, as the summer went on, Jalen Smith, one of the top contracts for a linebacker. You're talking about Lyle Collins, one of the top contracts for a right tackle. Ezekiel Elliott, at the time it was the top contract for a running back. Amari Cooper, one of the top contracts for a receiver. You can't just keep piling those up all within a 12 to 13 month span and expect that you're going to be in a good situation in 2 or 3 years. That's just not the way the salary cap is built. I'm sorry, and I get that the salary cap continues to go up and up every year for football, but you can never just assume that. So, there's some tricks to it. And of course, Dak Prescott's camp has some tricks too. Dak Prescott's camp, it knows what every other quarterback's agent knows exactly what Carson Wentz and Jared Goff and Russell Wilson, their agent knew. And that is that, in 4 years, we've got a new TV contract that's going to come up, and it's going to be a frenzy of money thrown up in the air and say, hey, no, we want to keep this bid, or hey, man, if they're not giving you the number we want, this is what we're paying. There's going to be probably a significant boost in the salary cap when that happens. That's why Dak Prescott's camp has stood firm. We want a 4-year contract. That's why Carson Wentz and Jared Goff last year, we want a 5-year contract. Russell Wilson as well. That's where we want to be. We want to come up when that big balloon happens, when that balloon bursts and all of a sudden we've got a huge jump in the salary cap. Because when that happens, everybody's market value goes up. Well, guess what? That's what Dak Prescott and his camp want. Dallas Cowboys, they don't usually do that. No, we've usually got a plan in mind that includes 5 years. It has a lot to do with your age. It has a lot to do with the 5-year plan. And that's exactly what Dak's camp is pushing for. Now, it sounds as in recent negotiations and what we've heard as far as offers are made, like the Cowboys have conceded that, okay, we'll drop it to 4. And yes, the 32 to 33 million mark, you know what? We may even be willing to bump up to 35, which is another Dak Prescott request. However, in the same sense, the Dallas Cowboys want to win in this negotiation too. We want some form of flexibility in this as well. And that may come in the terms of guaranteed money. We might want that number a little bit lower, and we might want it a little bit front-loaded because we do have an offense that's ready to win now. And we don't know how Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy, that marriage is going to last. So if that turns out to be an absolute flop, we would like to know that, you know what? 2 years into this, we could probably we might be able to axe this deal and move on, to a new plan. And yes, that's not what we're planning for. That's not what we expect to happen. But in the same sense, we don't know what's going to happen. We're in uncharted territory. Dak Prescott has never played for Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy has never worked, in Dallas. There's a lot up in the air. And you know what? Hey, worst case scenario, This is a negotiation. This isn't just, hey, here's my checklist, hit all the marks if you're Dak Prescott. No, it's no different than CBA negotiations were. You're going to give some, you're going to get some. Dallas Cowboys, that may be what they want is, hey, bud, we do still have quite a bit of flexibility this year under this year's cap. Let's see how much guaranteed money we can fit in under this year's current cap situation. And let's see if we can't get a lot of it in year 2 as well. That way, if this goes south, then we can always, say, you know what, hey, we're going to go ahead and move on. And we're going to go anew because, hey, we've got a terrific young group of receivers. We've got a running back locked in, an offensive line for the most part that's locked in. This is what we wanted. We wanted that flexibility that if this didn't work out, to not have to just blow it up. And so that's something I think Dallas is probably pushing for, and Dak Prescott's camp is probably tiptoeing. And at some point, you got to get back to a negotiation table and say, okay, well, if y'all aren't willing to budge on that, what are you willing to budge on? Can we get back into the 5-year negotiation? Can we get back to the 32-33 annual average negotiation? Where are you going to give and get a little? Because it sounds like the Cowboys have been a little bit early, at least based on reports, have been a little bit more eager to bend a little bit of recent. And it sounds like Dak Prescott's camp, there's something that's tripping this up that isn't quite getting the deal over the top. That's what I'm thinking it is. It's that guaranteed money so the Cowboys can have something fall in their favor. And if that's the case, I don't blame them one bit, because at the end of the day, having Dak Prescott here is a great thing. He is a great leader of men. He is a very good football player. But, keeping him here should not be at the expense of our future success when we have to turn around and say, yeah, Michael Gallup, hey, bud, we're probably not going to be able to keep you. And Leighton Vander Esch, hey, man, you had some good seasons for us, but bud, hey, we've got to let you go as well, or better yet, Tyron Smith. Hey, bud, you've done some great things for us, but man, your contract's the one that we can ixnay, and we can, absolutely, create more space in order to keep one of those guys. Once you're getting to that point where you're basically creating cap casualties, that's when the franchise, the team itself is basically sacrificing so that one guy could have his perfect deal. So I do. I think it's right for the Cowboys to stay a little firm, and it's right for Dak Prescott to go after his. I mean, everybody, I get it, guys. These guys, who knows how many other times he's going to get to cash in. And yes, he does cash in with his endorsements. Being the quarterback of America's team comes with a lot of attention, and with that attention comes a lot of opportunities to go out there and make money on your name. I'm hoping that at some point the Cowboys can come to a happy marriage on this, because like you and I said, this 53-man roster is getting better and better. It's getting closer to that point where we can be more than just hype, but a legit Super Bowl contender. And I don't want to see us take a step backwards in that situation because we spent too much on a contract that put us in a bad situation and down the line.
And I think what you're saying is pretty spot on because, the quarterback and the franchise, the coach, general manager, all of it is a marriage. And right now, like you're saying, they're maybe tempting to front load that contract, get a lot of that guaranteed money out of the way initially, because after 2 years, for lack of a better term, you're going along with the marriage analogy, you can look at the divorce settlement. If we cut ties with Dak after 2 years, what is it going to cost us at that moment? What's it going to mean to the cap over the next, year, 2 years, whatever the case might be? So I think just as much as Dak's trying to get his on the front end with the guaranteed money or whatever the case may be, I think Dallas is also looking at, to your point, if we got to cut ties with this thing early, we don't want to be stuck, because you look at the Aaron Rodgers contract in Green Bay. Green Bay is essentially stuck with how much they paid him. And now with the Jordan Love draft pick, that's all up in the air. So to your point, you don't want to be stuck because you sacrificed 52 other players so Dak could get his. And while the NFL does stand for not for long, like you said, Dak is able to cash in off the field. So even though the average NFL career is only 3.5 years, Dak has surpassed that. The end of his career is nowhere in sight. Is he going to negotiate another contract? Yes. Is he going to negotiate 2 more contracts? Very well, possibly. But I'm with you. The Cowboys cannot sacrifice the next decade of their franchise just so Dak can get his. Even for me, $32 million is a little rich for my blood for Dak. $2 million a game for the quarterback, but there's only 32 of them that start in the league. There's only 32 of them that can win you a Super Bowl, and we know half of them can't. So Dak is one that possibly could, like you said, with the supporting cast. So sometimes you got to bite that bullet, and you got to make that contract offer. And speaking of making that contract offer, you touched on it with Zeke having a big-time contract. And I wanted to see, do you have any Todd Gurley type fears of him breaking down? Because when you look at his yardage and usage over a 4-year stretch from 16 to 19, in 2016, 1,631 yards, 17,938. 2018 came with 1,434 yards. And this year in 2019, he rushed for 1,357. So how do you feel about the Zeke contract? Do you have any worries about him breaking down and this becoming the Tony Pollard show?
I'll say this
rather
much.
than later.
I had a little bit of question in my mind through this draft process about that Zeke Elliott deal. Right about the time that I saw that DeAndre Swift and Clyde Edwards-Helaire were 2 of the Cowboys' virtual visits. I mean, when that happened, I said, whoa. What are these guys going to bring to the roster that Zeke or Pollard doesn't? Or who knows something that we don't? That's what I want to know. I mean, but to your point, and it's funny, at the time of the Zeke deal, I was really, really pushing for the Cowboys to stand firm. I get what Zeke is going through. I know the devalue process of the running back, and almost the way that they're almost, this process has been very unkind to them. The 5th-year options and the franchise tags that could basically keep a first-round pick around throughout, if he's a running back, throughout his entire career. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, even if you're a special player, that 7 years could be your prime. And then all of a sudden, I haven't really gotten that opportunity for that long-term deal. Yes, the 5th-year option is pricey. And yes, franchise tags are big money. But there's so much more on that 4 or 5 year extension. So, I really wanted the Cowboys to play a little bit more hardball because I was really interested to see how the running back position was going to continue to evolve. And it's funny, by the end of this season, I was telling myself, I think the Cowboys might have jumped ahead of the curb on this thing. I think they might have gotten ahead of everybody and said, you know what? Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette. These names are on their way. And you know what? Everybody we went through a cycle there in the draft where they said, no, sir, the top 10 is not too high if that running back comes in a premier package. Top 10 is not too high for a guy like Saquon Barkley, who, in my opinion, was the best player in his draft, the best overall prospect in his draft. I thought Zeke was right there in a three-headed race with Jalen Ramsey and Nick Bosa for that, or I beg your pardon, Joey Bosa in that draft. So it's like, guys, we are getting some really premium packages with some of these running backs that are coming into the league. Christian McCaffrey was a top 10 pick. Leonard Fournette, who, by the way, guys, had a very, very encouraging season last year for the Jacksonville Jaguars, added some things to their passing attack, that suddenly, it's like, wow, this guy... This guy may be more of than what we thought he could be, which was going to be your typical LeGarrette Blount or Brandon Jacobs, your big back that could be featured, but you better darn well have a nice complimentary piece for passing downs. No, suddenly it's funny how all of a sudden you're looking at it and these contracts are coming quick. Christian McCaffrey just reset the market in some ways. Derrick Henry... Derrick Henry was the best football player for the last 2 months of the season when you include the playoffs. He was the most dominant football player in this league, and I thought Lamar Jackson was hands down the MVP this year, and yet Lamar Jackson the last 2 months of the league wasn't a better football player than Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry put a team on his back, essentially, and said, guys, let's go. And so... when you look at that, Derrick Henry is on the franchise tag right now. He wants his payday. Christian McCaffrey just got paid. Who knows what in the world's going to come with Alvin Kamara? I don't know how New Orleans can afford to pay them. They are going to be in a salary cap bind. But the bottom line is, I keep looking at it and I say, man, what if Zeke had gone out? And yes, he was top 5 in rushing this year. What if he had gone out and led the league in rushing again this year? And all of a sudden, Christian McCaffrey would have gotten that contract before he did. And maybe even Derrick Henry. Those teams would have rushed. Let's get him signed. Now, all of a sudden, the Cowboys are like, now we might be, adding another $20, $25 million onto that contract that we gave him. I think the Cowboys might have gotten ahead of a curve that proves that, hey, the running back position is not dead in this league. We value it very high. And we're starting to get skill sets, complete skill sets coming into the NFL on a year-by-year basis with some of these backs that are very special. And suddenly that's going to be something we see featured again. And I do, it's funny. I'm kind of jumping from one side of the fence to the other on that, but that's kind of the way I viewed it by the time the season ended. When you looked at what McCaffrey did, when you look at what Henry did, and some of these younger backs, Nick Chubb. Guys, I know Nick Chubb doesn't necessarily sound like he should be a threat to what Ezekiel Elliott could get paid. But my goodness, another 1,000-yard season in year number 3, and he's eligible for an extension. And Zeke Elliott could have still been, he could have still been waiting for his. So, and Saquon Barkley, if that guy can stay healthy and the New York Giants can build a system that takes advantage of him, my goodness, who knows what he could be. So, or his paycheck could look like. So at the end of the day, I've kind of jumped ship on that. Yes, there is still part of me that wonders if that Zeke Elliott deal might be that thing that one day we're looking at and saying, damn it, Michael Gallup could have come here, man. Or we could have kept him here. We could have kept that together. Or Leighton Vander Esch, man. Or better yet, who knows what Jordan Lewis or Chidobe Awuzie will do with this new defensive scheme where they're no longer in Chris Richard's, very specific, skill set, that he wants in that scheme. Now that they're out of that, who knows what this is a second and third round pick. And Chidobe Awuzie has always demonstrated the ability to stay in a guy's pocket. Unfortunately, it's finishing plays that has always been his issue. Who knows if that gets turned around and all of a sudden a guy like that jumps onto the list as someone like, man, we might really want to keep this guy. So, yes, there is always that fear. But, if we're going to continue to feature Zeke the way we did under the Garrett era, which sounds like Mike McCarthy wants to do that, you spent all that money on this offensive line, and now the writing's on the wall with the Zeke deal. You might as well continue to feature him. If that's going to be the case, then you know what, guys? Hey, then there's not really that many better options across the league to have in Dallas than Zeke Elliott.
Oh no, I'm with you, and especially if the plan is to move towards a more run-focused offense with Zeke, then definitely there aren't a whole lot of better options. My biggest concern with Zeke is just the pounding that he has taken over the first couple of years, and at least for me on the outside looking in, I'm not as close to the Cowboys as you. One thing that it looks like to me is it looked like towards the end of the season that they were going more towards Pollard. Pollard was getting more and more snaps. And for me, I didn't know if that was by design to keep Zeke fresh or if that was just a sign of him breaking down. And for me, when you look at the running back position, it's hit or miss. To me, there's two philosophies on running back in the NFL. You have the running back by committee, like in Kansas City this past season, where they were running out. It seemed like everyone whose name began with a D, if it was Darwin Thompson, Damian Williams, whoever else, it might have been LaShawn McCoy for a couple of weeks. But you either do that running back by committee, or there is the philosophy, like you mentioned, with Christian McCaffrey, with Zeke Elliott. You get the big time back with a multifaceted game that can contribute in more than just lugging the seed 20, 25 times on a Sunday. And you pay that man and you lock him up and you do try to build an offense around that skill set that maximizes him not only in the run game, but like you said, now the game has changed. Running backs in the passing game, that's a big thing. You mentioned Alvin Kamara with the Saints and how they're going to be able to navigate their salary cap situation. But between Kamara and McCaffrey, you're looking at the poster children for running backs catching the ball, in my opinion, in the NFL. But yeah, I hope that the Zach, I'm combining them both. The Dak and the Zeke thing don't end up tying you guys up too long in the future, because Dak and Zeke are roughly the same age. If you're going to tie up one, I would assume you'd want them both for the whole. So it'd be interesting to see how that contract situation plays out. But I want to flip over to the defensive side of the ball. And I want to talk to you about the expectations for the defense coming off the 2019 season, where they were giving up 327 yards per game. There were a couple of key departures. As we've mentioned, Byron Jones has moved on from Dallas to Miami. Jeff Heath found his way out. Robert Quinn, Christian Covington, Kevon Frazier. There's a whole list of defensive players from Dallas last year that will not be suiting back up for the Cowboys this year. And we've talked about the draft class and how they address some defensive needs, not only through the draft, but with the undrafted signings. And you've heard the name Leighton Vander Esch come up. So, Austin, I want to ask you, how important are Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch to this defense? You mentioned the Jalen Smith contract.
Yeah, they really are, especially when you look at the scheme that we're moving to and the defensive coordinator that's going to run it. Look, Mike Nolan has made a career of turning great linebacker duos into, Pro Bowl, duos, into all pro duos. You look at his history of work. I've got friends down in New Orleans that tell me, Austin, we had no idea DeMario Davis was going to be this. And I said, guys, Mike Nolan, I'm telling you, Mike Nolan. Now, but here's the thing, we've had a lot of departures, and I get people all the time. They want to, talk about who from the old system fits the new. And I say, yeah, guys, with that question basically leads me to say this. We're going to need quite a few new faces in this defense. Especially on the defensive line. And that's how Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch are going to be the feature players, are going to be the ones that really stand out in this new system. We're going from what Marinelli did in a Tampa 2, where you value on the interior of that defensive line, undersized one-gap penetrators that can get up the field and cause chaos. We are going from that to a two-gap scheme that values big-bodied, long-armed defensive tackles that attack the blocker as opposed to the gap in order to cover two separate gaps. Now, offensive line, that's completely against what they're after. So what that does is it draws more double teams to the defensive linemen, which allows those linebackers to run free. Those two traditional linebackers in this, like I say, we are supposed to be moving to a hybrid scheme. I know that there was a lot of yes, but, or possibilities to how we get that walk down linebacker position filled and that interior shaded in position filled. There was going to be a lot of, if, ands, or buts about how much this scheme really goes into play in year one based on the personnel we were able to corral. Yes, if Aldon Smith and Randy Gregory are reinstated, suddenly we've got more than enough options of guys who could stand up on the line of scrimmage as that stand-up linebacker. So it's but at the end of all that, like I say, when you've got that kind of presence up front, when you have to pay that kind of attention to those two DTs to get those initial double teams in order to try and move him off a spot and push him into a one gap responsibility, as opposed to allowing him to recreate the line of scrimmage by getting that lineman pushed back a yard or two and then get him locked out and say, okay, now guess what? Running back goes right, I go right. He goes left, I go left. That's kind of, that's really what is going to help make these linebackers. It's going to help them live up to what their potential says it is. Because Jalen Smith, let's be honest, this is a guy that without that knee injury in that Zeke Elliott draft, he's probably up there with Bosa and Ramsey, in the conversation of the top five. And Leighton Vander Esch, a first round pick, that just exploded in his first year. These two guys are, and I hate to throw out combinations like this, but these guys can be an Urlacher-Briggs combo. They can be a Bowman-Willis combo. If in the right system that takes advantage of their abilities, and let's be honest, they have to stay healthy, they have to stay on the field as well. But that is exactly what we want to move to. That's exactly who we're hoping to feature in this. And yes, for all the Cowboys fans out there that say, well, we got those DTs, Gerald McCoy, Dontari Poe, guys, it's got to be more than that. More defensive tackle is probably the position you see the most amount of rotation at. Reason being, you just can't ask a guy to be 300, 310, 320 pounds and be in shape. I'm sorry, guys. That's just not how the human body is built. Endurance suffers with added weight. And so you constantly want to rotate guys. So, and for everybody to say, well, we drafted Tristan Hill last year. Guys, he could not be a worse fit for what we're moving forward to. Antoine Woods got a possibility we could bring him back. Once again, we're talking about a guy that's just over 6 feet with a undersized arms. I mean, not just adequate arm length, but below average arm length. Those are guys that probably, with Woods, he's probably not even going to get tendered as an exclusive rights free agent. And that should tell you about how different these two schemes are. Because Antoine Woods, as an exclusive right free agent, there is no tender levels. You can offer him whatever you want in a contract. I mean, as long as it's above league minimum to that point. But you can offer him whatever amounts you decide is fit. And at that point, he becomes a restricted free agent, in which you either sign the tender and play for that year under that price tag, or you don't sign it and you sit out for a year. So, when you can name your price in a scenario like that, and you're still probably tapping the brakes on whether or not you're going to do it, because we've got till June to do it. And there still hasn't been any sign that the Cowboys have interest in that. That should tell you how different these two drafts are. And like I say, Tristan Hill, 2nd round pick last year. I personally think we reached on him. I think a lot of people probably felt that way. But, he was a guy that Marinelli pounded the table for. We gave him to him. And now all of a sudden we're stuck with a second round pick who we probably couldn't even get a fourth or fifth round pick in a trade at this point based on his lack of production as a rookie. The fact that some of the negative hype surrounding him coming out of Central Florida did turn out to come true. There were issues with his practice habits. He had some issues with Dallas showing up late and things like that. So, I mean, at this point, that should tell you how different these two systems are and how much we need turnover on this roster. That's why Neville Gallimore was an important piece in this draft. That's why, we still may be out there looking for possibly one more DT to add to that rotation. Still probably, I know, Tyrone Crawford could play that interior shaded end on the stand-up linebacker side. Jalen Jelks could probably do that too, a guy that was a late-round pick for us last year, but actually, surprisingly, has quite a bit of experience in a similar role during his time in Oregon, where he was kind of an inside shaded player. The transition is coming, but that's what you really need to know, is that this transition is coming in order to take advantage of two skill sets, and that is Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith.
And you talked about what they need from the guys around them, and needing the defensive line presence to take a step up. And there's going to be some new guys that are going to need to establish themselves as a presence, because you can't rely on Gerald McCoy and Dontari Poe for, like you said, 65, 70 snaps a game, because men that large just crashing in head on to people play after play. You're right. It's not a recipe for success. You can't be out on the field exerting that type of energy, that type of physicality for, like we just said, the 65, 70 defensive snaps in a game. But I do want to ask you, now with Byron Jones being out, Clinton Dix coming in, the defensive backfield not going to really look like anything that it looked like in the year previous. If I were to say, you have 5 seconds, I need the 4 starting DBs for week 1. Who are they?
Xavier Woods, Clinton Dix, Trayvon Diggs, and you can fill in the blank on the fourth one. I'm going to go with Chidobe Awuzie because the athletic skill set is there, but we're going to see a lot of different personnel packages with this bunch, I think.
And then that other cornerback position opposite Trayvon Diggs, is it going to be a 2-man battle?
Boy, that is going to be the biggest story to camp is, Jordan Lewis, probably our best true cover guy outside of Byron Jones over the last few years. I mean, the size didn't always help him in Chris Richard's system that kind of seemed like it had a Six Flags ride ladder next to the cornerback room that said, hey, you got to be this tall to play on the perimeter in this system. But Jordan Lewis, gosh, I was always a big fan of his coming out of Michigan, and he really has done some good things here. Chidobe Awuzie, gosh, he is so close to being a terrific corner in this league, but it's finishing. It's getting his head turned and locating the football. It's getting his hands, up to make a play on the football. It's getting his hands on guys early in the process. Those are just things that Chidobe Awuzie has struggled with. He's got the feet that every corner in this league would love to have. But yet, we're still not seeing, we're still not seeing the type of production to come from him. I mean, it could very well be Robinson. It really could be. If he's able to put together some of the techniques that we're asking him to learn early in camp, they could say, hey, we want those 2 physical guys on the perimeter. Let's go there. Daryl Worley could be in that mix. This is a situation where our defensive backfield, especially at cornerback, this is going to be a tricky draft, especially for Maurice Linguist, who is, and Al Harris, who are very, Maurice Linguist, this is his first NFL job as a defensive backs coach. Al Harris, this is a step up to his most serious position as an assistant defensive backs coach. And it's like, man, you're giving me like a bunch of corners. I mean, with a variety of skill sets. and you're telling me to pick two. I mean, I might be able to do it. We might not. We might have to come up with different personnel groupings based on what we're planning to do, how we're planning to attack. Are we planning to come after the quarterback and blitz? Are we planning to play a little bit more zone? Are we planning to kind of mix match, based on the receivers that we're going up against? Are we planning on putting Diggs on a particular guy and carrying him like that? Or Jordan Lewis, who's, a very good slot player, and asking him to maybe match a very capable slot receiver? I think we will see a lot of rotation at the cornerback this year, because I think it's a lot to go into with a brand new set of coaches that are going to be very new to this at the NFL level, with a bunch of cornerbacks with a variety of skill sets in a brand new defense. I think that, asking them to say, okay, go pick two, I think that's going to be tough. I think that's too much to ask. I think they're going to say, look, guys, when we're looking at playing maybe a little bit more, zone coverage, or playing a little bit more off coverage, this is the package we're going with. When we want guys up in your face, this is what we're going with. If we're going to come after the quarterback or play a little bit more to prevent style defense, this is what we're willing to go with. I think that is the best idea. And yes, that may make you a little bit predictable based on the personnel packages you bring onto the football field. But you know what? It's not throwing your defensive backs coach and all of that young talent out to the line. It's not throwing them under the bus and saying, hey, guys, you've got to keep up with what we want you to do, no matter your skill set or what your strengths and weaknesses are. I think, that's a scenario where we may see a lot, and like I continue to say, we just may see a lot of different personnel groupings in the season, throughout the season. We may see two guys start week 1, and by week 6, we might have two completely different starters. By week 16, we might have, two guys that have never started across from each other until that final month of the season. That's just the kind of variety we've got at that position. And it's really, it is a little bit of a blessing, when you've got that many possible solutions. It's something that you love to be in. Unfortunately, a lot of those solutions still come with a lot of question marks, and that can kind of be a tough circumstance to be in. So this cornerback position is going to be a bit of a roller coaster this year.
Oh no, and definitely listening to you with what you have to say right there. I mean, like you said, Al Harris being brought over, he spent time in the league as a defensive assistant secondary coach. But this does look like it will be his most extensive look right now, and you just wonder how much of his former player is going to come out in this talent evaluation. You just wonder if that's going to offer a different perspective in that final battle for that other cornerback position based on the scenario that we just went through. Because I always feel like former players turned coaches just offer such a unique perspective that's very different from what someone that's just, coached for however many years, never really played in the NFL or at that level. So it'll be interesting to see how involved Al Harris will actually be in camp when it comes to not only coaching the players, but then, like you said, once you get into team, how involved he is with those sort of packages and putting them together in the defensive backfield, trying them out as you navigate the preseason. Like you said, trying to find that combination that could vary over the 16-week season. And now, Austin, do you have any final thoughts, any parting shots, anything along those lines?
No, really, I look at this Dallas Cowboys roster, and there's still a lot to be excited about. Jerry Jones wanted this coaching transition to involve a small step back, not a large step back and somewhat of a rebuild. He wanted, a coaching staff that was going to come in, get their feet down, and get this team competing very quickly. I think based on what we've done in free agency, what we've done throughout the draft, the different names we've brought in as far as assistant coaches, a lot of head coaching experience, Mike Nolan's got head coaching experience, as does Tom Sula. Some of the special assistants we've brought in, that have worked with Mike McCarthy in the past, are guys that have that, have got upper echelon coaching experience. So overall, I really do think, we've done a good job of making that task reasonable for Mike McCarthy. Of being able to look at him and say, hey, we do want to compete this year. Yes, we still expect to win an NFC championship this year. And I beg your pardon, NFC East championship this year. That is still the expectation. I think we've done a good job of making that task reasonable for Mike McCarthy. Because let's be honest, when you let Byron Jones go, when you lose that many faces on defense, when you've got, questions long term about the quarterback position because of a contract, I mean, those are all detrimental to a winning format. They don't necessarily have to be catastrophic, but they are still bumps in the road to a winning format. And so for a lot of the things that they've done, I think they've done I really do think Mike McCarthy has a much easier task than day one of him signing here when it comes to, hey, go win an NFC championship, NFC East championship. Let's be contenders to make a run in the playoffs. If that's the expectation, and I think we've done a good job of giving Mike McCarthy a reasonable path at that.
And I mean, those are not the most loftiest of goals, I would say, in year one for McCarthy. I mean, you look at the NFC East, you look at the Giants there, an improving squad with Daniel Jones being in his second year this year, taking the reins over from Eli full term, not really having to look over his shoulder. And like I said, they're improving, so you don't think they're going to be that much of a threat. With the Washington Redskins, new coaching staff and Ron Rivera, question marks at quarterback with Dwayne Haskins. Are they going to go to Alex Smith? Because Dwayne Haskins was drafted by the previous regime under Jay Gruden. And then with Philadelphia, I mean, you know how Philadelphia is. They're going to be 6-8, and they're going to need to win their last two games, and they're going to win their last two games, and then they're going to wear the underdog mask, and you just know how Philadelphia is. But so I'm with you. I don't think that an NFC East title should be out of the picture for Dallas, given the offensive weapons that they have, what they've done to build around Dak, protect him with the offensive line. Like we said, the weapons around him. And then also defensively. We noted that it's a change defensively. A lot of the faces that were there won't be there this year. They do have two studs in Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch that they're able to build this new defensive front around. Tons of head coaching experience, as we mentioned, on staff with McCarthy. So you feel like he's going to give a little bit more freedom to those coaches with the prior experience, being Nolan as a defensive coordinator, a couple other guys that we've mentioned, Jim Tomsula on the D-line. I feel like it's a beautiful situation for the Cowboys. I feel like it's a little bit different of a situation. Just from the outside looking in, I feel like Jason Garrett ran a very mysterious type of program coaching staff, if you will. I feel like he just didn't really give you much when it came to what he was thinking. I felt like a lot of his answers were always consistent. It was almost like he had option A, option B, option C for every question that was answered because they sounded rehearsed to me, at least. In my experience with McCarthy growing up in the Chicago area, following him with the Packers, I feel like with McCarthy, I feel like he's learned his lesson. I feel like he, took his punches in Green Bay. I feel like he learned what he did well, what didn't do well, how to manage players, how to manage the media, the expectations, all that sort of thing. Now, the Dallas media, don't get me wrong, is nothing like Green Bay. Green Bay is a tiny little place compared to Dallas. I'm highly aware. But the national expectations for Green Bay, there is that media pressure. I feel like McCarthy's learned. I feel like it's a more relaxed environment from McCarthy this time around.
Absolutely.
Does any of that sound true from my perspective?
It's always so funny, to kind of to be a fan, but also know the coaching duties day by day and the mindset it takes to be part of that. I mean, the kind of highs and confidence that can come with winning a Super Bowl or, consistently being an NFC North powerhouse, during the days of whether it was Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, I mean, the confidence and almost, I would almost say overconfidence that can come with that just naturally, and then to turn around and go through some of the Well, maybe my quarterback and me are on two separate pages, and you know, and we're making decisions based on trying to get younger, or trying to do this or trying to do that. Like he was. Jordy Nelson's gone. Rodgers isn't thrilled about it. Cobb's gone. Rodgers isn't thrilled about it. There were just so many different things, I think, that toward the end of his career that kind of let him know that, hey, bud, don't ever get too high up on that saddle and don't ever get too low. You know what? You got to always stay a little bit even because it can, getting too confident can be, a detriment, and obviously, that's something I think that happened a little bit in Green Bay. I think, it became a situation where Rodgers expected success at such a high level and McCarthy expected success at a high level. And that when differing opinions on how to go about that came into play, suddenly we saw rifts and splits. And so it's one of those things where I think, you learn, and what I mean by not getting too high on that saddle is you learn to keep a workman type attitude. Don't let that confidence get too high. Don't let them forget about the steps that they took in order to build that franchise up into a Super Bowl contender that were so vital in the process. Let's not forget that, guys, hey, at the end of the day, we've got to always be able to work hard, and we've all got to understand that any one of us is expendable at this process at any time. You never know when a Jordan Love is going to get drafted and they're going to be moving forward in that scenario. You never know when a coach and a quarterback all of a sudden, or a coach and a GM are suddenly going to, finally admit to each other that, no, I don't think that's the proper path moving forward. As you said, ownership, GM, coach, quarterback, those are vital relationships. And when you start getting people going in separate directions, it can be a problem. And confidence is a big reason for that. It's because everybody's like, hey, I've had success. I'm right. So, you got to keep that workman-like mentality. You got to keep them working at the things that built the Super Bowl contender in order to keep that confidence under control, in order to keep those relationships respectable, in check, keep them as two-way streets where communication can come and go and there's still respect there, and there's not an overabundance of confidence and arrogance that all of a sudden, well, bud, I'm an MVP. I'm a Super Bowl coach. I've built a Super Bowl franchise. Guys, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. You're all right for separate reasons. If we don't, we've seen that in Dallas. We might be one of the greatest examples of two guys in a rift. The Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson era should have been a dynasty that lasted as long as the Belichick Brady one. And instead, we got two Super Bowls out of it. And Barry Switzer kind of, took that team to a third Super Bowl in 95, a year, after blowing one of the most talented rosters I think the NFL's ever seen in 94. But that should have gone on so much longer. And it was because two guys were very confident in what they'd contributed to a Super Bowl building process. And suddenly they were right and the other was wrong. And they just got too high up on their saddle. I think McCarthy has taken that away from this situation. Hey, guys, it's back to the building stage of a Super Bowl and of a Super Bowl contender. And that's where I need to stay. That's where I need to stay in my seat, is keeping that workman-like process. Let's not let those egos get too high. If I got to spend all training camp busting egos, popping egos, then you know what? That's what I'll do. Let's keep the workman-like attitude, and that includes the coaching staff, includes in the front office. That's a team effort, and hopefully, that's something he's learned. Hopefully, that's something Jerry Jones has learned, and I think, the national media probably doesn't respect some of the things he's given up in this process. Stephen Jones and Will McClay deserve a ton of credit, possibly more credit than Jerry Jones does for the way this franchise has been operated over the last 10 or so years. They really do. the drafts we've had, the reasonable contracts we've passed out in free agency, they have always given this team an opportunity to succeed. We have always had talented rosters. There's never been any doubt about that. Even the biggest Cowboy hater will tell you, well, yeah, they've always got talent, but and I'm not going to disagree with that necessarily. What was identified as the problem is Jason Garrett and that coaching staff seems to be the obvious reason of why that talent wasn't becoming maximum. They weren't making the most of it. And that's what I think Mike McCarthy, hopefully him and this new staff, they bring that together. Hey guys, we've got a lot of big names here. A lot. Look across this offense, and not even the offense. Look at the defense. The two linebackers we talked about. Tank Lawrence. Some of the young defensive backs, the talent is there. Let's make the most of it. Let's stop having years where Pro Bowl players are having down years, disappointing years that aren't necessarily injury related. Let's start maximizing talent here in Dallas, because the talent's never been the issue. Getting the most of it has. At least that's what's been identified, and I hope Mike McCarthy comes in and fulfills that. I really do.
He is Austin James Smith. I am Craig Forrestal. This is the That Sports Guy podcast. We are signing off, and that is the state of the franchise.